Perhaps you have sat in a meeting where a colleague kept interrupting, twisting your words, or smiling with sarcasm before you had the chance to explain. It feels as though you are forced into a corner, compelled to prove your worth. And then, in your own haste, you fall into the trap. You speak more than necessary. You justify yourself. You lose your center. Afterward, when the meeting ends, you leave the room with regret, asking yourself, "Did I let them pull me into their game?" That moment reveals a truth. Most people lose their ground, not because of a lack of knowledge or ability, but because of a lack of discipline in emotion and response. Stoicism calls this the loss of the self, the instant you allow the outside world to dictate how you behave. True strength does not come from loud displays, nor from overwhelming others with arguments. It comes from inner stillness, from the ability to remain steady when the world around you is in turmoil. And there are 6 principles that will help you train that strength. Rule 1. Master your emotions. In every circumstance of life, whether in work, family, or social relationships, human beings are constantly tested by emotion. A single criticism, a delay, or even an unfriendly glance can ignite in us powerful and sudden reactions. Many believe that the instant display of emotion proves authenticity and individuality. But in truth, most impulsive reactions leave us weakened and exposed. When a man no longer governs his emotions, he surrenders the command of his mind to the outside world, allowing the actions of others to dictate his own behavior. This runs against the very spirit of Stoicism, where self-control is seen as the highest foundation of personal strength. Emotions, according to the Stoics, are not enemies, but neither are they truth. They are fleeting impressions, reflexes of the mind in response to external stimuli. Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "The mind can turn any event into an obstacle or an opportunity. It is not the thing itself, but our judgment of it that determines our destiny." This means that when we let anger, fear, sorrow, or excitement govern us, we forget they are only passing signals, not a compass for action. The Stoic does not seek to erase emotions, but to observe them as a sage observes the sky, aware that dark clouds gather, yet unwilling to chase after them. In practice, when a person acts entirely from emotion, he becomes predictable and easily manipulated. Imagine an opponent in debate who knows that a slight insult or sneer will provoke your fury and cause you to lose composure. In that moment, you no longer control the situation. You have become a puppet whose strings are pulled by emotion. This is why impulsive reaction is always seen as weakness, not strength. You may raise your voice, you may display your rage, but the only thing you prove is how easily your mind can be swayed. The Stoic, by contrast, chooses calm. He does not deny that emotions arise, but he cultivates the space between the external trigger and the inner response. That space is the refuge of freedom. When harsh words are spoken, you may feel discomfort rising, but you need not answer immediately. When injustice appears, you may feel indignation, but you need not rush to unleash it. In that silence, you choose to respond with reason instead of instinct. This is the line that separates the untrained from the disciplined. Mastery of emotion does not mean coldness or apathy. It does not turn you into a machine without soul. On the contrary, it grants you the power to choose the right moment and manner of expressing your emotions with meaning and restraint. A man who holds back his anger may speak later with greater force, and his words will weigh more than shouts in a fit of rage. A man who remains composed in the face of mockery may let silence reveal the emptiness of his attacker. And a man who conquers fear may walk further on the difficult path. while others have already turned back. Stoic philosophy reminds us that the true enemy is not the one who insults you, but your blind reaction to the insult. Seneca once said, "No one is offended without his own consent." This may sound paradoxical, yet upon reflection it proves true. An insult only has power if we choose to believe it matters. If we treat it as passing wind, it cannot shake the mind. Thus, training ourselves to observe emotions instead of serving them is the only road to inner freedom. In modern society, where social media encourages instant reaction, this skill has never been more necessary. A negative comment can rob a person of sleep. A single post can provoke waves of outrage. But the Stoic views such moments as opportunities to practice composure. He is not indifferent, but he knows that giving strangers online the power to control his emotions is a form of slavery. Instead of reacting on impulse, he watches, weighs, and chooses either silence or a measured response at the right time and place. Emotional stillness also grants an advantage in relationships and in work. In negotiations, the hot-tempered man exposes his weakness, while the calm man sets the pace and frame. In personal bonds, the one who erupts in anger leaves wounds that are hard to mend, while the one who restrains and speaks wisely builds lasting respect. The Stoic is not without feeling, but he knows emotions are tools to be used, not masters to be obeyed. Ultimately, mastering emotions is the first step toward mastering the self. A man who cannot control his emotions cannot control his actions, cannot make wise decisions, and cannot lead others. But when a man stands steady in the storm, he becomes a pillar for those around him. Such strength requires no noise to prove itself. It is visible in stability and endurance. Rule 2. Use silence as a weapon. In the modern world, where everyone competes to speak, where noise, opinions, and clamor have become a false measure of worth, silence is often mistaken for weakness or ignorance. Yet to Stoic thought, silence never means emptiness. On the contrary, silence is a discipline of the mind, a tool for maintaining initiative, and a strategy for revealing inner strength. The Stoic knows that words lose value when they are excessive, and only in deliberate silence can speech regain its true weight. In conversation, most people rush to fill the void because they fear awkwardness, feel anxious when nothing is said, or dread being judged for keeping quiet. This fear makes them predictable, because in their haste, they reveal more than they intend. The Stoic does not treat silence as something to escape, but as a battlefield where discipline is tested. He knows that in silence, others begin to speculate, to expose themselves, and to betray their hidden thoughts. It is in that moment that quiet power is born. Silence is a form of trial. It forces others to confront their own unease. When a dialogue falls into pause, many feel the pressure to break it with any words at all, even those that are careless or unwise. But the one trained in Stoicism holds the pause, using it as proof of control. As Epictetus reminded, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we may listen twice as much as we speak. In patient listening, in resisting the urge to fill every space, a quiet strength emerges. Unlike passivity, Stoic silence is a choice. It is not helplessness, but sovereignty. When a man chooses silence, he reminds himself that he need not rush, need not prove, need not follow the rhythm others impose. That silence creates a space where reason can work, where emotions can settle, and where any word that follows will carry greater force. In the realm of power, silence creates scarcity, and what is scarce becomes valuable. When you do not speak at all times, when you do not reveal your opinion in every situation, each word you choose to utter gains special weight. Others listen, not because of your volume, but because your rare words suggest careful judgment. This is why silence is often compared to a sword sheathed, a hidden power waiting for the moment to strike deeply. Silence also sharpens observation. When you are not consumed by preparing your reply, you can listen more fully, see more clearly, and notice subtle signals others miss. It may be hesitation in the voice, contradiction in the reasoning, or insecurity in a gesture. Such details reveal themselves only when silence leads. The Stoic understands that patient observation often reveals more than 1,000 questions. And from silence, deep understanding takes form. Purposeful silence is also a trial of the self. It trains the endurance of discomfort, the restraint of craving attention, the focus to remain steady while the world is restless. Rather than treating silence as lack, the Stoic treats it as a wall of protection, guarding against needless agitation. In stillness, the mind is given space to order, to sift, and to heal. Silence becomes not only a tool in communication, but also a remedy for inner disorder. There is a truth few notice. When you always speak, people begin to devalue your presence. But when you know how to keep silent, you create distance, and within that distance, others begin to wonder. They grow curious about your thoughts. They wait. They lean in when you finally speak. As Marcus Aurelius once reminded, the strongest man is the one who masters himself. And one of the clearest proofs of self-mastery is the ability to choose silence over needless speech. When silence is practiced long enough, it ceases to be forced and becomes second nature. You no longer feel the need to speak to be noticed. You no longer get pulled into the game of voices competing for attention. Instead, you become the calm center in a storm of noise, and it is that stillness which sets you apart. Others may dominate through words, but you dominate through presence. And in that presence, power is recognized without being declared. In the end, silence is a weapon. Stoicism teaches us not only for defense, but for offense, not only for protection, but for influence. It is the art of restraint, of observation, and of scarcity. The one who knows when to remain silent is never weak, for he understands that in a world of noise, silence is not absence but rare strength. And it is this rare strength that makes silence an invisible weapon that cannot be defeated. Rule 3. Deliberately allow others to misunderstand you. On the path to cultivating inner strength, there is a principle few recognize, yet one of profound value: knowing how to let others misunderstand you by choice. At first, this may sound like deception, but in Stoic philosophy it is not dishonesty. It is the discipline of knowing what should be revealed and what should remain concealed. For when you expose your entire self to the gaze of others, you become predictable, and whatever is predictable can be controlled. The Stoic understands that elusiveness itself is a kind of power, and purposeful ambiguity can serve as armor against the designs of others. People often live like open books, ready to expose every thought, every feeling, every motive in their words and gestures. Such transparency may feel like honesty, but it also means others can easily grasp both our strengths and our weaknesses. When someone can anticipate your actions and reactions, they can adjust their strategy to exploit or neutralize you. This is why a person who knows how to hold something back, who lets others see only an incomplete picture, always has the advantage of initiative. Allowing others to misunderstand is not a meaningless game of intellect. It is a way to preserve the distance necessary to protect your self-command. In conversation, if you are not eager to correct every misunderstanding or rush to counter every misjudgment, you retain control. Others will continue to build assumptions upon your silence, and in doing so reveal more about themselves than about you. It is the art of letting absence speak, of turning lack of information into a trap where others expose their own nature. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "Do the right thing without needing to explain it." This contains the wisdom that you need not correct every misconception, nor chase after recognition in the eyes of others. The hunger to be understood makes you dependent on their approval, and in that dependence, you hand them the power to define you. The Stoic takes the opposite path. He acts according to reason and his own values, while leaving others free to speculate. The decision to let others misunderstand can also disarm their defenses. When people think you are less capable than you are, they lower their guard, and in that ease, they often reveal more than they should. This is not for you to exploit, but for you to observe, to learn, and to decide with greater clarity. One who is underestimated yet inwardly trained in calm and wisdom will always surprise when the truth emerges. The heart of this principle is patience. You must be strong enough to resist the urge to correct every false impression, to avoid being swept into the cycle of proving yourself. Others may think you weak, incompetent, or ignorant, but you need not rush to deny it. You know your value, and that value does not rest on the fleeting judgments of others. This patience not only keeps you composed, but grants you the power to choose the moment when your true strength will be revealed. Epictetus once said, "The wise man does not need to let the whole world know he is wise." This affirms that true knowledge and true strength never need to be displayed, for genuine value reveals itself when the time is right. The Stoic does not compete for recognition because he knows that such recognition is fragile and ever-changing. Instead, he patiently cultivates his inner strength and lets misunderstanding serve as a shield. In a world where people crave to be understood and fear misjudgment, the ability to accept and even use misunderstanding is a rare art. It demands confidence. It demands the ability to stand firm in yourself without external validation. And when a man achieves this, he becomes an enigma, a figure difficult to control, one who preserves complete sovereignty over himself. Deliberately allowing others to misunderstand is not mere gamesmanship, but a mark of inner maturity. It shows that you do not need to win every argument or be perceived rightly in every moment. You only need to live true to your values while letting the opinions of others serve as the mist that veils your sharpened edge. And when the time comes, the truth will uncover itself, and your strength will resound without the need for a single justification. Rule 4. Know when to be absent so your presence has value. In a world that constantly urges people to appear, to speak, to be everywhere, deliberate absence becomes a rare form of strength. People often assume that the more they appear, the greater their worth. That attending every conversation, being present at every event, and accepting every invitation proves their importance. But in truth, constant presence makes us predictable, replaceable, and slowly strips away our weight. The Stoic understands this law and takes the opposite path. He turns scarcity into power so that his presence carries meaning instead of becoming routine. Absence guided by reason is not retreat out of fear, nor is it irresponsible withdrawal. It is a disciplined choice. By not being everywhere, you turn your appearance into an event rather than an expectation. When presence is rare, it naturally attracts attention, inspires appreciation, and lends greater weight to every word and action. This follows a familiar principle of scarcity. What is seldom encountered is valued more, not because its essence has changed, but because human perception has rendered it precious. In Stoic philosophy, knowing when to withdraw is also a way to guard one's energy and focus from being wasted on trivial matters. Epictetus once reminded, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." This does not only encourage humility, but also implies that you need not be part of every discussion to prove your worth. Absence from the unimportant is presence in what truly matters. The Stoic knows that time and energy are finite resources, and how we allocate them defines the quality of our lives. Furthermore, absence is a way to establish boundaries. When you are always available, others assume your time is theirs to take at will, but when you choose absence, you send a quiet message. My presence is not granted without condition, it is bound to value and choice. From this, others are forced to respect limits, to think carefully before seeking you out, and to treasure your presence when it truly happens. This is not arrogance, but the protection of inner worth, a form of preserving dignity and self-command. Deliberate absence also shapes how others remember you. If you appear too often, familiarity makes your image fade. By contrast, when you hold back, memory of you sharpens, for every appearance leaves a distinct mark. This is why Stoic philosophers and leaders rarely allowed themselves to drift aimlessly in crowds, but chose to appear when needed and withdraw when enough had been said. They understood that value does not lie in frequency, but in the depth of each presence. Scarcity also creates anticipation. When you are not always present, others begin to wonder when you will appear. They begin to wait. They begin to value it. While constant presence becomes taken for granted, absence makes each encounter more memorable. The Stoic uses this principle not to manipulate, but to remind that everything in life requires limits, and only what is limited can preserve lasting value. It is crucial to remember that absence is not abandonment. It is not shirking responsibility or rejecting relationships, but a considered choice to ensure that your presence always carries meaning and integrity. You do not need to be everywhere to prove you matter, for importance does not come from frequency, but from the quality of your presence whenever it occurs. In practice, this principle teaches us to discern what is worth attending and what is best declined. Not every meeting has value. Not every conversation deserves our time and focus. The Stoic learns to choose, and in that choice becomes magnetic, for his presence is never accidental, it always carries a message. In the end, knowing when to be absent is not a weakness, but a discipline and a wisdom. It protects energy, defines boundaries, heightens the value of presence, and reminds the world that your appearance is not to be assumed. In a society where people clamor to be seen, the one who dares to choose timely absence leaves the deepest impression. And that is why, in Stoic thought, scarcity is seen as a quiet yet enduring form of power. Rule 5. Lead through reflection. In the art of leadership and influence, people often think of imposition of seizing control by forcing others to obey commands or adopt opinions. Yet in the spirit of Stoicism, true power does not come from coercion, but from the ability to create harmony. That harmony is born through a quiet and subtle skill, the power of reflection. Reflection here is not passive imitation, but conscious presence, where you adjust your rhythm, attitude, and energy to establish a shared cadence with the one before you. When people feel reflected, they feel safe, they feel understood, and in that safety they open themselves, becoming more willing to receive influence. Reflection is an art of communication, for it does not demand that you dominate or win every exchange, but that you listen and adjust yourself to create harmony. The Stoic sees that people resist force but soften before empathy. When someone feels attuned, their defenses fall away. They lower their guard and allow your presence to enter their mind without resistance. In such harmony, you do not need to prove with many words. Your presence itself becomes the guiding strength. The strength of reflection lies not only in making others comfortable, but in granting you the quiet initiative that few notice. Once rhythms align, you can begin to guide that rhythm, leading it in the direction you choose. From initial reflection, you slowly become the one who sets the tempo, and others naturally follow. This is not manipulation, but gentle direction, where you begin with harmony and then quietly lead. Marcus Aurelius once reminded, "Live as though your soul is in harmony with the soul of the universe." This can be understood to mean that true strength is not found in imposing discord, but in shaping oneself to align with the greater order, and from that harmony, influence flows. To lead by reflection springs from the same principle, not breaking down to control, but creating a shared rhythm to guide. A crucial element of reflection is humility. To reflect, you must lay aside the ego that demands to dominate at once. You do not enter conversation with the spirit of "I must win," but with the spirit of "I must understand, so I may guide." This is the divide between shallow power and profound power. Shallow power comes from suppression, but profound power arises from empathy. The Stoic chooses the latter, for it endures, for it builds connection instead of resistance. Reflection is also a way to dissolve conflict. When someone is consumed by anger, meeting anger with anger only fuels the blaze. But if at first you reflect their intensity to acknowledge their feeling, and then gradually lower the rhythm, you create a calm space into which they can step. In this way, reflection becomes a bridge, guiding another from their storm into the stillness you hold. Stoicism sees this as the highest victory, for it requires no violence, no clamor, yet restores order. Once reflection has built trust, it opens the door to persuasion. No complex arguments are needed, no endless debates, only the quiet presence of harmony, and words fall more easily into place. The Stoic knows that people rarely remember exactly what you said, but they always remember how you made them feel. Reflection makes others feel respected, and from respect, they are more willing to be led. The essence of this art is authenticity. If reflection is only a false technique, it will be quickly uncovered and backfire. But when it arises from true attention and awareness, it becomes lasting power. The Stoic trains for mindful presence to observe others with clarity and to adjust himself with sincerity. This is the foundation that makes reflection enduring. Leading through reflection proves that power need not be loud or forceful. It shows that the greatest strength often manifests in silence, in listening, and in harmony. When you reflect, you not only understand others, but also open the way to guide them naturally. And in the Stoic spirit, this is the highest form of leadership. Not forcing, not grasping, but standing steady, present and attuned, leading through peace and certainty. Rule 6. Know when to walk away. One of the most subtle expressions of inner strength is the ability to walk away at the right moment. In life, people are often held back by fear of loss, by the habit of clinging to what is familiar, even when it no longer holds value. Such attachment is often disguised under noble names like loyalty, patience, or endurance. But in truth, it is only the fear of being left behind, the fear of facing emptiness, the fear of losing one's place. The Stoic understands that walking away, when done with reason and principle, is not failure, but proof of strength and freedom. In every conversation, relationship, or circumstance, there are natural limits. When those limits are crossed, when exchange becomes meaningless, when connection turns into burden, holding on no longer shows perseverance but becomes self-destruction. Epictetus once said, "If you want to be free, learn to let go." Letting go here is not turning your back in hatred, but a wise choice born of the understanding that nothing outside has the power to bind your mind except by your consent. To walk away in the Stoic spirit is to step out of what no longer fits, in order to guard the tranquility of the soul. People often remain trapped in relationships or situations without exit because they believe presence itself is proof of worth. They fear that by leaving, they will lose status or recognition. But the Stoic does not measure his worth by the permission or approval of others. He knows that dignity lies in the ability to act in accord with reason. And when circumstances violate that principle, walking away is not the last option. It is the only option. Walking away is also a form of silence that carries weight. Instead of arguing to exhaustion, instead of explaining to convince those unwilling to understand, the Stoic chooses to leave, letting his absence speak more powerfully than words. In that emptiness, others are forced to question themselves, to face the silence created by departure. This is why, in many cases, walking away leaves a deeper mark than any confrontation. It is a declaration without speech, the strength of action without noise. To walk away is not indifference or apathy. It is not the refusal of connection with the world, but the protection of one's core values. Marcus Aurelius once warned, "Hold on to yourself, for if you do not, you will cease to belong to yourself." When a situation demands that you sacrifice peace, integrity, or dignity merely to remain present, you have already begun to lose yourself. The Stoic knows that staying in a place unworthy of his presence is no different than selling his soul to what lies beyond his control. Moreover, walking away is an act of taking initiative. When you know when to stop, you free yourself from the passivity of being forced. You need not wait until everything collapses. You act before the damage becomes irreparable. This shows the discipline of reason, not clinging out of emotion, not blinded by habit, but deciding by principle. Through this initiative, walking away no longer bears the mark of defeat, but becomes an act of freedom and power. The Stoic also sees walking away as protection for the future. For every moment we cling to what has lost its value, we waste time and energy that could build life elsewhere. To walk away at the right moment not only frees the present, but clears space for what is new and worthy to appear. It is like cutting away a dead branch so the tree may grow stronger. In Stoic thought, walking away is thus an act of courage and wisdom, for it places growth and long-term peace above short-term comfort. Knowing when to walk away is a sign of maturity and inner strength. It shows that you are not bound by fear of loss, not ruled by the hunger for approval, and not willing to extend your presence in what is meaningless. The Stoic walks away not out of weakness, but from the understanding that to cling can be surrender, while letting go at the right time is the truest victory. In a world where most cling, the one who knows how to walk away is free, and that freedom is the strongest power of all. Reflecting on these 6 principles, I realize that true strength never lies in noise or in striving to prove oneself to others. It is found in self-mastery, in the ability to govern emotions, to choose silence at the right time, to remain unpredictable, to limit one's presence, to reflect in order to create harmony, and to walk away with courage when necessary. These principles are not tools to manipulate or to defeat others, but disciplines that allow us to stand firm in a world of constant turbulence. Each day, I learn that when I lessen my need to react, when I stop seeking recognition, I feel lighter and more steadfast. It is this stillness that gives me a sense of freedom that nothing external can take away. If you find value in these reflections, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the content to come. And always remember, the greatest strength is not in conquering others, but in conquering yourself in every moment of life. I will see you again in the next video.